The first time I heard my son's voice, he was asking whether I was his mother. I didn't know what to say. Not because I didn't know the answer. Because I did. I just didn't know how to tell him that the answer had been stolen from both of us. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October when the hospital called. I remember the exact time because I was standing at the nurse's station checking blood work on a 6-month-old patient when my phone vibrated against the counter. 4:17 p.m. Unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it. I was a pediatrician. My days were built around ringing phones, crying babies, worried parents, pharmacy calls, school nurses, insurance companies, and people who believed a fever of 99.8 meant their child was dying. I had learned to let unknown numbers go to voicemail. But something made me answer. Dr. Carver speaking. Dr. Maya Carver. Yes. This is St. Vincent's Emergency Department. My stomach tightened. Is something wrong? There was a pause. Then the woman on the other end said something that would divide my life into a before and an after. There's a little boy here. He's 5 years old. His name is Owen. I waited. He listed you as his emergency contact. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because sometimes the brain laughs when it doesn't understand what it's hearing. I'm sorry? Your name is listed as his emergency contact. I think you have the wrong person. I don't think so, doctor. His records specifically say Dr. Maya Carver. I stared at the infant's chart in front of me. My hands suddenly felt cold. I don't have children, I said. Another pause. Then the woman lowered her voice. He keeps asking for you. My heart began pounding. Who brought him in? That's part of the problem. What problem? He was brought in by a stranger who left before registration could get his information. I stood up. What do you mean, left? He said the boy's father was coming. And? He never came. Something about her voice made the hairs on my arms rise. Is the child hurt? Not badly. A fever, dehydration, some bruising. The physician wants to keep him overnight for observation. I closed my eyes. Then called Child Protective Services. We already did. Then why are you calling me? Another silence. When she spoke again, her voice was almost apologetic. Because Owen won't talk to anyone. I swallowed. Except me? Except you. I didn't remember driving to St. Vincent's. I remember the rain. I remember running 2 red lights. I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers hurt. And I remember telling myself the entire way that there had to be an explanation. A clerical mistake. A prank. A child with the same name. Someone who had somehow confused me with another Dr. Maya Carver. Anything. Anything except the impossible. When I reached the pediatric emergency department, a nurse was waiting. Dr. Carver. I nodded. I'm Lena. I called you. Where is he? She looked at me carefully. Before I take you in, there's something you should know. What? He recognized you from a photograph. My mouth went dry. What photograph? We don't know. Lena. I'll explain. She led me through the double doors. The emergency department was unusually quiet. A monitor beeped somewhere behind a curtain. A child cried in the distance. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. Then we reached room 12. Lena stopped. He's in there. I looked through the glass. A little boy sat curled on the hospital bed. He wore a faded green sweatshirt. His knees were pulled against his chest. In his arms was a stuffed rabbit that had clearly been loved for years. Its left ear was almost completely torn off. The boy looked small. Too small. 5 years old, I thought. 5 years. Then he turned his head and looked directly at me. I stopped breathing. His eyes were different colors. One was blue. The other was brown. Just like mine. My mother used to say my eyes were the first thing people noticed. My right eye was brown. My left eye was blue. It was a rare genetic trait that had fascinated me since medical school. And now a 5-year-old stranger was staring at me with the exact same eyes. He dropped the rabbit. Maya? My knees almost gave out. Lena whispered, he knows you. The boy climbed down from the bed. He walked toward me slowly. Not like a stranger. Like a child approaching someone he'd been waiting for. He stopped less than a foot away. His lower lip trembled. Then he asked the question that shattered my world. Are you really my mommy? I couldn't answer. I looked at Lena. Then at the boy. Then back at Lena. I don't know him. The little boy's face crumpled. I knew you would say that. I crouched down. What? He wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Daddy said you wouldn't remember. My blood went cold. Who is your daddy? He looked toward the hallway. Ethan. The name meant nothing. Ethan what? He shook his head. I don't know. Where is he? The boy hugged the rabbit. He went away. When? This morning. Where? He said I had to find you. I glanced at Lena. Then I noticed something hanging around the boy's neck. A small silver pendant. I reached toward it. The boy pulled back. Daddy said nobody could take it. Why? Because it proves you're my mummy. My fingers trembled. Can I see it? He hesitated. Then he handed it to me. It was a tiny silver circle. I turned it over. There were initials engraved on the back. MC. My initials. Maya Carver. I felt the room tilt. Where did you get this? Daddy gave it to me. When? Before he left. I stared at the pendant. Then I saw something scratched onto the inside. A date. October 14th. My birthday. I stood up. Lena, I need to make a phone call. To whom? My lawyer. I didn't have a lawyer. Not yet. But I knew I would need one. Because somewhere between that phone call and that moment, I understood something terrifying. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had built a secret around me. And that secret had a 5-year-old boy's face. My parents were dead. My father had died when I was 17. My mother died 3 years later. I had no siblings. No children. No husband. No boyfriend. No secret pregnancy. No adoption. Nothing. My life was painfully ordinary. I had gone to medical school, completed my pediatric residency, and started working at St. Matthew's Children's Clinic. I worked too much. I drank too much coffee. I lived alone. I had never even wanted children. Or at least, that's what I had told myself. So how could I possibly have a 5-year-old son? That night, Owen was transferred to a pediatric room under protective supervision. Child services arrived. A detective arrived. Then another detective. Everyone asked questions. Who was the father? I didn't know. Where had Owen lived? He didn't know the address. Who had raised him? His father. What was his father's name? Ethan. Last name? Owen didn't know. Did he go to school? Sometimes. Where? He didn't know. What did his father do? He fixed things. What things? Computers. The detective looked at me. Do you know an Ethan? No. Anyone who might have access to your personal information? I shook my head. Then Owen spoke from the hospital bed. Daddy knew her. We all turned. How? The detective asked. Owen looked at me. He said he loved her once. My chest tightened. The detective wrote something down. Did he say anything else? Owen nodded. He said she was the only person who could save me. I couldn't sleep that night. At 2:13 a.m., I was sitting beside Owen's hospital bed. He was asleep. The stuffed rabbit rested against his chest. I watched the monitor. Heart rate 91. Oxygen 99%. Temperature improving. Everything about him looked peaceful. Then he whispered in his sleep. Mommy. I closed my eyes. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. I wanted to wake up. Instead, I reached over and pulled the blanket higher around him. And that's when I saw it. A small scar behind his left ear. A crescent-shaped scar. I had the same one. I touched mine. It had been there since childhood. My mother had told me I'd gotten it when I was 4. A fall from a bicycle. I looked at Owen's scar again. No, that couldn't be coincidence. It was too much. The eyes. The scar. The pendant. My name. My birthday. And a father who had disappeared. At 3:06 a.m., I made the call. Dr. Patel? My friend answered sleepily. What's wrong? I think I have a son. Silence. Then, what? I need you to run a genetic test. Maya. I know what you're going to say. Do you? Yes. You're exhausted. I know. This sounds insane. It is. Where are you? The hospital. What happened? I looked at Owen. A little boy was brought into the ER. He says I'm his mother. Another silence. Do you know who his parents are? No. Then why do you think? Because he looks like me. That shut her up. I need a DNA test. Tomorrow. Tonight. Maya, hospital laboratories aren't going to process. Then find someone who will. She sighed. Okay. I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. Because there was something else. Something I hadn't told the detectives. 3 days before Owen appeared, I had received an envelope. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. A man standing beside a little boy. The boy was Owen. And the man was smiling. I didn't recognize him. But on the back of the photograph, someone had written, "You deserve to know what they did to you." At the time, I thought it was a threat. Now I wasn't so sure. The DNA test came back 4 to 6 hours later. I was sitting in a conference room with Detective Alvarez when Dr. Patel walked in. She didn't sit down. She placed the envelope on the table. My hands were shaking before I opened it. "You're sure?" She nodded. "It's conclusive." I unfolded the paper. I read the first line. Then the second. Then I stopped. Mother-child relationship probability. 99.999999%. I stared at the number. My vision blurred. So I'm his mother. Dr. Patel sat across from me. Yes. I laughed once. A broken, terrified sound. How? We don't know. That's not possible. I know. No. You don't understand. I never gave birth. I know. I've never been pregnant. I know. Then how? She looked at Detective Alvarez. We're going to have to find out. The investigation began that day. And with it came the first discovery. My medical records from age 20 had been altered. Not my current records. Old records. Records from a private fertility clinic where I'd once volunteered as a research assistant. I remembered the clinic. Northbridge Reproductive Research Center. I had worked there for 6 months during medical school. I remembered the director, Dr. Adrian Vale. He had been brilliant, charming, respected. He had treated me like a daughter. When my mother died, he sent flowers. When I graduated, he gave me a watch. When I got into residency, he called personally to congratulate me. I trusted him. More than that, I loved him. He was the closest thing I had to a father after mine died. And now his name was appearing in documents connected to my son. I stared at the screen. No. Detective Alvarez leaned closer. You know him? Yes. Where is he? I don't know. When did you last see him? 6 years ago. Why did you stop seeing him? I swallowed. Because he disappeared. The detective looked at me. People don't usually disappear from your life without a reason. He did. Why? I don't know. But deep down, I was beginning to remember. 6 years ago, Dr. Vale had asked me to participate in a genetic study. A harmless study, he said. He wanted to examine inherited traits. He needed a blood sample. I gave it to him. Of course I did. I trusted him. The blood sample had been taken on a Tuesday. A week later, I left Northbridge. 2 months after that, Dr. Vale disappeared. I had forgotten about the blood sample. Until now. Detective Alvarez looked at me. Did you consent to reproductive use of your DNA? No. Are you certain? I am a doctor. I need a legal answer. I never consented to my DNA being used to create a child. He wrote something down. Then he asked, did Dr. Vale know anyone named Ethan? I stared at him. I don't know. Find out. We found Ethan 3 days later. Or rather, we found his body. He had been living under a different name in a small town 2 hours north. The police found him in an abandoned motel room. Dead. No identification. No wallet. No phone. Just a handwritten note. It contained 6 words. Maya will know what to do. I hated him for dying. I hated him because his death meant I couldn't ask him questions. Who was he? Why did he have my DNA? Why did he raise Owen? Why did he leave? And why did he believe I would know what to do? The police found a key in his pocket. It opened a storage unit. Inside that unit was the truth. Boxes. Photographs. Medical records. Audio recordings. Legal documents. And one locked metal case. My name was written across the top. Maya Carver. Do not open until Owen is safe. I looked at Detective Alvarez. What does safe mean? He shook his head. I don't know. We opened it. Inside was a laptop. A flash drive. And a letter. The letter was addressed to me. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Dr. Adrian Vale. My hands went numb. I opened it. Maya, if you're reading this, then Owen has found you. I'm sorry. That was all I could read before my eyes filled with tears. I kept going. I told myself I was protecting you. That was a lie. I was protecting myself. The letter explained everything. Years earlier, Dr. Vale had created a private genetic research program. Officially, it was designed to study rare hereditary traits. Unofficially, he was doing something else. He was collecting genetic material from young medical researchers without telling them the full purpose. My blood sample was among them. Dr. Vale discovered something unusual about my DNA. My rare eye pigmentation. Certain markers associated with a hereditary immune disorder. He wanted to study how those traits passed between generations. But he needed a second genetic contributor. That was where Ethan came in. Ethan wasn't Owen's biological father. He was the man who had agreed to participate in Vale's experiment. But something went wrong. The experiment wasn't supposed to produce a child. At least not legally. Yet Owen was born. A child created using my stolen genetic material and an embryo transferred into a surrogate without my knowledge. I stopped reading. No. Detective Alvarez took the letter. I stood up. No. Maya. He was created. The words tasted horrible. He was created from me. Yes. Without my permission. Yes. And someone carried him. Yes. Who? The letter didn't say. I screamed. Not at the detective. Not at Dr. Vale. At the universe. At every person who had known. Every person who had allowed it. Every person who had looked me in the eye for 5 years while my son existed somewhere in the world. Then I remembered Owen. His little hand. His rabbit. His mismatched eyes. He hadn't done any of this. He was innocent. So I sat back down. And read the rest. The surrogate had died during childbirth. Ethan had taken Owen. He had raised him secretly. Why? Because Dr. Vale wanted Owen back. Owen wasn't just a child to him. He was proof. Proof that the experiment worked. Proof that stolen genetic material could be used to create a child without the donor's consent. Ethan had refused to cooperate. He ran. He raised Owen alone. For 5 years. Then Ethan discovered that Vale had found them. He knew he couldn't protect Owen forever. So he sent him to me. The last page contained a warning. Vale has money. He has connections. He has lawyers. He will tell you Owen belongs to the laboratory. He will tell you that you have no legal claim because you never gave birth. He will tell you the child is property of the research project. Don't believe him. Owen is not an experiment. He's a little boy. And you're his mother. At the bottom was one final sentence. I'm sorry I couldn't bring him to you myself. I cried for a long time. Not because of Ethan. Not because of Dr. Vale. Because of Owen. 5 years old. And already learning that adults could abandon him. I went to his room. He was awake. Mommy? I sat beside him. I'm here. He looked at me. Are you staying? I wanted to say yes, but I had learned that promises were dangerous. So I told him the truth. I'm going to try very hard. He smiled. Then he reached for my hand. His fingers were tiny, warm, real. I held them. And for the first time, I allowed myself to think the word. Son. My son. The custody hearing happened 3 weeks later. Dr. Vale's attorneys arrived with 27 pages of documents. They claimed I had no parental rights. They claimed Owen had been legally transferred to a research organization. They claimed my genetic material had been donated voluntarily. They claimed I had no relationship with the child. That last statement hurt the most. Because technically, it was true. I had no memories of his first word. No pictures of his first steps. No bedtime stories. No kindergarten drawings. No scraped knees. No birthday cakes. Nothing. I had missed 5 years. And I couldn't get them back. The judge asked me one question. Dr. Carver, why do you believe you should have custody of this child? I stood. My hands were shaking. Because he's my son. Vale's attorney stood. You never raised him. No. You never gave birth to him. No. You didn't even know he existed. No. Then what makes you his mother? I looked at Owen. He was sitting beside the social worker, holding his rabbit. I looked back at the judge. His DNA doesn't make me his mother. The courtroom became silent. Neither does biology. I took a breath. I'm his mother because when I found out he existed, I didn't walk away. The attorney smiled. That isn't sufficient legal basis. Maybe not. I looked at the judge. But I'm asking the court to consider something else. What? Ask him. The judge looked at Owen. The little boy was brought forward. The judge leaned down. Do you know who this is? Owen looked at me, then smiled. My mummy. The attorney objected. The judge ignored him. Why do you call her mummy? Owen shrugged. Because she came. The judge's face changed. Came where? The hospital. And what happened? I was scared. What did she do? Owen looked at me. She stayed. The judge sat back. That was the moment everything changed. The court granted me temporary custody, but it wasn't over. Because Dr. Vale was still alive. And he wanted Owen. He appeared 2 weeks later. Not in court. At my house. I was making Owen breakfast when the doorbell rang. I looked through the window. A man stood on my porch. Older. Gray hair. Black coat. A familiar face. My heart stopped. Dr. Adrian Vale. I called the police. But before they arrived, he spoke through the door. Maya, you need to listen. I didn't open it. You stole a child, I shouted. No. You stole my DNA. Yes. You created a child without my consent. Yes. And now you're standing outside my house. I came to tell you the truth. You had 6 years. I was afraid. I laughed bitterly. You? Yes. Of what? Of what you would become when you learned. I stared at him through the glass. What does that mean? He looked at the upstairs window. Owen isn't the only one. My blood ran cold. What? There were others. The police arrived. Vale was arrested. But his words wouldn't leave my head. Owen wasn't the only one. There were others. Children. Created using stolen DNA. I spent the next 6 months helping investigators dismantle Vale's entire operation. They found records. Dozens of them. Young doctors. Researchers. Students. People who had given blood samples believing they were participating in harmless studies. Some had children they never knew existed. Some had no idea. Some were already dead. I testified. I gave interviews. I fought. But my greatest fight was at home. Because while I was fighting for justice, Owen was learning what it meant to have a mother. The first night he called me mommy without hesitation, I cried in the bathroom. The first time he fell asleep against my shoulder, I didn't move for 2 hours. The first time he got sick and reached for me, something inside my chest broke open. I realized motherhood wasn't something that happened in one dramatic moment. It happened in thousands of tiny moments. A glass of water at midnight. A bandage on a scraped knee. A missing stuffed rabbit. A nightmare. A school project. A forgotten lunchbox. A whispered question in the dark. Are you going to leave? No. Ever? No. Promise. I learned to answer differently. I'll do everything I can to stay. Because I couldn't promise forever. But I could promise today. And tomorrow. And the day after that. 1 year after Owen came into my life, we visited Dr. Vale in prison. I wasn't sure why I went. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I wanted to hate him. Maybe I wanted answers. He looked older. Smaller. Human. That was the hardest part. I wanted him to look like a monster. Instead, he looked like the man who once congratulated me when I got into medical school. Owen stayed outside with my sister's husband. I sat across from Vale. Why me? He looked at the table. Because you trusted me. That isn't an answer. You had the genetic traits I wanted. So you stole them. Yes. You made my son. Yes. You took 5 years from me. His eyes filled with tears. I know. No, you don't. I leaned forward. You don't know what it's like to look at a child and realize you missed his entire life. I know. You don't. I watched him grow. I froze. What? Vale looked at me. I saw him. My stomach turned. You watched him? Sometimes. Where? From a distance. Why? Because I wanted to know if the experiment had worked. I stood. You didn't see a child. I know. You saw an experiment. Yes. And Ethan? He changed everything. What happened to him? Vale looked away. I didn't kill Ethan. Did you order someone to? No. Then who did? He shook his head. I don't know. I didn't believe him, but I didn't have proof. I turned to leave. Maya. I stopped. He said, "There's one more thing." I looked back. Owen has a genetic condition. My heart stopped. What? He inherited a mutation that can cause severe cardiac problems later in life. I stared at him. You knew? Yes. And you never told anyone? I was studying it. You were studying my son's potential death. He said nothing. I walked out. That night, Owen had a full cardiac evaluation. The results showed a genetic risk, not a certainty. A risk. But it meant regular monitoring. It meant another shadow hanging over our lives. And it meant I had one more reason to stay. Years passed. The case became national news. People called me brave. They called me a hero. They called me a victim. I hated all three. I wasn't a hero. I was a mother. And my son wasn't a symbol. He was a kid who loved pancakes, dinosaurs, and drawing terrible pictures of cats. He hated broccoli. He slept with the rabbit his father gave him. He still asked questions about Ethan. What was Daddy like? I never lied. He loved you. Was he good? I thought about the secrets. The running. The fear. The decisions. I think he tried to be. Why did he leave me? He was scared. Of what? Of losing you. Owen looked down. Did he love you? I swallowed. I never knew him. But he knew you. Yes. Did he want you to be my mommy? Yes. Owen smiled. Then he was right. Sometimes children make forgiveness look easy. Adults make it complicated. Owen turned 10. Then 11. Then 12. By 13, he was taller than me. By 15, he had my stubbornness. By 17, he had my habit of tapping his fingers when nervous. And he still had those eyes. One blue. One brown. Mine. At 18, he asked for the complete records. I gave them to him. Every document. Every photograph. Every letter. Every ugly truth. He read them alone. 3 hours later, he came downstairs. I was sitting at the kitchen table. He stood in the doorway. Was I wanted? The question nearly destroyed me. Yes. By you? I stood. Not at first. His face fell. I stepped closer. Because I didn't know you existed. He looked at me. But when I found out, I touched his face. I wanted you more than anything. He cried. So did I. I was scared you wouldn't love me, he whispered. I was scared you wouldn't love me. He laughed through his tears. You're my mom. Yes. You didn't give birth to me. No. But you raised me. Yes. He nodded. That's enough. I hugged him. And for a moment, I was back in that hospital room. A frightened 5-year-old boy clutching a broken rabbit. Asking me if I was his mother. I finally knew the answer. Owen became a genetic researcher. Ironically, perhaps inevitably. But unlike Dr. Vale, he believed science had one rule above all others. Consent. He helped establish a foundation for victims of genetic exploitation. We called it the Owen Project. Its mission was simple. No person's DNA should ever be used without informed consent. No child should ever be treated as property. No family should ever have to discover the truth by accident. And every year, on the anniversary of that Tuesday phone call, Owen and I returned to St. Vincent's. We sat in the same emergency room. Room 12. The hospital had changed the furniture. The walls had been repainted. But I remembered. The first moment I saw him. The first time he said mommy. The first time I realized someone had stolen 5 years from both of us. 1 year, Owen brought the old stuffed rabbit. It was falling apart. I had offered to replace it dozens of times. He refused. Why keep it? I asked. He smiled. Because it brought me to you. I looked at him. You know, I said, I used to think the worst thing that happened to me was having my life stolen. What do you think now? I smiled. I think the worst thing was believing the stolen years meant I wasn't your mother. He squeezed my hand. You were. From the beginning. He thought about it. No. My heart sank. Then he smiled. From the moment you stayed. Sometimes people ask me whether I regret that phone call. The answer is no. But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't answered. What if I'd let it go to voicemail? What if I had been too busy? What if I had said, "You have the wrong person"? What if Owen had never seen me? What if he had grown up believing he was an experiment? What if Dr. Vale had won? I don't know. And I don't need to. Because that phone call happened. A hospital called me and told me there was a boy waiting for me. I said I didn't know any child. They said he knew me. They were right. He knew something I didn't. He knew that somewhere in the world, he belonged to someone. Not because of blood. Not because of science. Not because of a legal document. Because of love. And if there's one thing I learned from the strangest, most painful chapter of my life, it's this. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family that saves you. Sometimes love arrives 5 years late. Sometimes it arrives holding a broken stuffed rabbit. Sometimes it arrives with mismatched eyes. Sometimes it arrives in an emergency room and asks you a question you're not prepared to answer. Are you my mummy? And sometimes the answer takes years. But when you finally know it, you realize you've known it all along. Yes, I am. I was. And I always will be. Because that Tuesday afternoon, the hospital didn't just call me about a little boy. It called me about my life. My stolen past. My unexpected future. My son. And the strangest revenge of all wasn't watching Dr. Adrian Vale lose his reputation, his career, or his freedom. It wasn't seeing his laboratory shut down. It wasn't watching the world learn what he'd done. My revenge was much simpler. I gave Owen the life Vale said he could never have. I loved him. I protected him. I told him the truth. And I watched him become a better man than any of us had imagined. Dr. Vale wanted to create an experiment. He accidentally created a family. He wanted Owen to be proof of his genius. Instead, Owen became proof of his failure. Because science without conscience is nothing. Knowledge without consent is theft. And a child is never evidence. Never property. Never a project. A child is a person. And my son taught me that before I ever had the courage to call him mine. So if you ever wonder what I would do if the hospital called again and said, "There's a boy here. Your name is his emergency contact," I'd go. Immediately. Because once you've been given the chance to find someone who was lost to you, you don't ask whether the timing is convenient. You don't ask whether you're ready. You go. You open the door. You stay. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the frightened little child who once asked whether you were his mother grows up and gives you the answer you needed your entire life. He did that for me. On my 42nd birthday, Owen handed me a small box. Inside was a silver pendant. The same one he had worn the night we met. But this time, the engraving on the back had been changed. My initials were still there. MC. Under them were 2 new letters. OC. Owen Carver. I looked at him. You changed it. He nodded. Why? Because I wanted it to say what it should have said from the beginning. I turned it over. Under our initials was a single sentence. We found each other. I cried. He laughed. Then he hugged me. And I realized something. Maybe that hospital call wasn't the beginning of our story. Maybe our story had begun years earlier, when someone stole my DNA. Maybe it had begun when Ethan decided to protect a child. Maybe it had begun when Owen opened his eyes for the first time. Maybe it had begun when a lonely little boy learned my name. But for me, it began when the phone rang. 4:17 p.m. Tuesday. A stranger's voice said, "There's a boy here." And I answered, "I don't know any child." They said, "He knows you." They were right. He did. And somehow, against every law of science, every law of probability, and every cruel decision made by the people who created our nightmare, he knew exactly where he belonged. With me. My name is Dr. Maya Carver. I am a pediatrician. I never gave birth to my son. I never knew he existed. And yet, when the hospital called, I went to him. Because sometimes being a mother isn't about the moment a child enters your body. It's about the moment he enters your life. And you decide never to let him face the world alone again. That was my revenge. Not destruction. Not hatred. Not even justice. My revenge was love. And after everything they tried to take from us, love was the one thing they couldn't steal.